Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento, and honestly, today's conversation is probably one that you've never had with anybody. I've never had it with somebody, and that's why I'm so excited to be doing it on air for all of us to learn from it, because as entrepreneurs, there are so many questions that we all have when it comes to the long-term financial situation of being a small business owner, whether that is pension plans, whether that is 401ks, whether that is thinking about retirement. And we're not learning it from merely a financial expert in today's interview, but we're actually learning it from a true serial entrepreneur, someone who loves entrepreneurship at such a deep level. I'm excited for you to hear all the different things he's got going on inside his entrepreneurial portfolio. So let me introduce you to today's guest. His name is Chris Stemler. Chris is the founder of the Crete Group. He's a seasoned senior ERISA consultant with a proven track record of optimizing employer-sponsored retirement plans. With over 10 years as a distinguished wholesaler, Chris possesses deep expertise in the 401k space, focusing on mitigating fiduciary risk, streamlining plan compliance, and delivering strategic advisor consulting. His approach combines hands-on guidance with a robust professional network, enabling plan sponsors to achieve greater security and advisors to deliver superior client outcomes. He's a sought-after speaker and educator because he excels at demystifying complex ERISA. I had to ask him about that acronym. We're going to test his academic knowledge there. He'll inevitably get into that stuff with us today, but the regulations behind that industry, equipping industry professionals with the knowledge to make informed, confident decisions. And hey, we might just talk about 3D home printing. We might talk about his 7 different companies. There's going to be a lot of good stuff, so I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Chris Stemler. All right, Chris, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brian. Very, very excited to be here.
Heck yes. There are so many things I want to talk to you about, but it's going to be hard to do all of it in just 30 minutes together. So let's dive straight in. Take us beyond the bio. Who's Chris? How'd you start doing all these cool things that you've been up to?
Yeah, great way to start. I call myself an industry brat, so I grew up with parents who were in the insurance and retirement industry, been in that industry from, second grade or earlier to now to some degree, and I've worked for Fortune 500 and large insurance carriers for years and years, and eventually just decided that I wanted to work for myself and do my own thing and service clients in a way that I was unable to do when I had handcuffs from these major corporations where I had to have sales goals or metrics or revenue numbers that didn't allow me to sit on the same side of the table as them. So I live here in Topeka, Kansas with my family. We own a number of businesses in town, but my general idea and passion is that I love building and working for myself. I love consulting and making sure that people get well educated on complex and, really often litigious and risky situations inside their businesses, and just trying to make sure everybody has the right resources that they need to do well.
Yeah, I love that overview, Chris, for so many reasons. Not only does it showcase that you're a true entrepreneur's entrepreneur, but I love the fact that as an industry brat, you have some really important vantage points, because let's face it, it's something that I'm sure you saw early on, that it's not easy to be self-employed. We miss out on so many of the things that 9-to-5 employees have because a huge corporation set it up for them. But as self-employed people, we have to figure all that stuff out. Talk to us about the nature from your vantage point. Obviously, it's very tied into what you do with the Crete Group, but these are real important considerations, especially for those of us who are self-employed.
Yeah, I think that when we started expanding into our own businesses, we were not thinking about all the knock-on effects. Our very first business that we started is the place I sit right now. We own an event venue here. My wife and her sister manage it. We've expanded to add full-time staff. We've expanded it to add part-time staff. We didn't realize all of the things that come And I think many business owners don't realize all the different complications that come with it: debt service, banking, HR, payroll, sales tax, property tax, all these different things that, individuals get a little bit when they own a home or a little bit when they buy a vehicle, but, you lump them all together and life gets pretty complicated pretty quickly. I think that we were not ready for that complication. We had a lot of learning moments and growing pains, but I think we were lucky because we had great friends who are attorneys, CPA firm, financial advisor firm, and then our educational background. I have an MBA, my wife has a master's degree, and so our other partners are well educated. And instead of being frustrated with problems, we would sit down together as a group, and each one of us has a thing. So finance and real estate for me, or event management and coordination for my wife, facilities for my brother-in-law, decor and organization for my sister-in-law who own it with us. And just this idea that we could trust each other enough to step up to the table and say, hey, I know this is complicated, but I've researched, this is how we fix it, or this is how we move forward. And so instead of just being afraid of those challenges or being frustrated, we kind of leaned in, and what that's done over time is just made that our approach to dealing with problems in our businesses.
Yeah, and especially you glossed over it, Chris. I'm really going to push you here to go deeper, because you have one of the cooler business portfolios that I've ever heard of. Very varied things, of course, what we're talking about with regards to your financial background, but even far beyond that, I teased just one of them very briefly in the intro. Talk to us about that business portfolio, and really, because we're talking to an entrepreneurial audience, I'd love to hear what that evolution looked like, because I know as a podcast host, all too often it sounds like these things just miraculously happen in your life, whereas of course it's been an evolution to get to where you are today.
Yeah, that's we'll start really basic. My wife and I had our first house. We bought our upgrade home that she tells me will be our forever home because we hate moving, and we decided to keep that first home as a rental. And we liked that. We learned some tough lessons. Our first couple tenants were not great, and not that they weren't great people, just we didn't do the right things to protect ourselves and to protect them and manage the business well. And so, but we just kept at it. We just kept learning. And so we went from, these W-2 employees to owning some real estate, and then just as COVID was happening, we decided we want to buy a wedding venue because, that's a great decision. Historic building, real estate, again, there were some tax credits and stuff that we utilized to make that happen. And from there, again, we were still expanding our rentals, and we just kind of every time, I was thinking about this conversation this morning, and I am a curious problem solver. If I find a yarn or, tangled up Christmas lights, I don't get frustrated by that. I get curious about A, how did it get tangled? And B, can I help untangle it? And that's what we did with the event space. It's, a very different style of wedding and event place than most people are used to. It's got 3 floors and a ton of square footage, and we do events differently. And just leaning into how does that differentiate ourselves. And so as we expanded our rental portfolios, and as we expanded the Beacon, which is our event space, I was still working my day job. My wife, her sister were working here, and we just kept expanding. We have a restaurant that we own with a partner, and we have just a couple other things that we do, but everything we do, we succeed through partnerships. And we're curious because it's like, hey, we have this event venue, maybe it would make sense for us to have a restaurant that could help with catering, and maybe it would make sense for us to have a mobile liquor trailer. We call it the Oasis, but it's an old Airstream we renovated that can go serve bar anywhere, right? Whether it's at food truck events. But all of it's hospitality driven. backed by the real estate I'm so familiar with. And then we decide to get more into the historic real estate, so we do a larger renovation into multifamily mixed use. And during that process, because I know you're going to want to talk about this because it's probably the most interesting thing we do, certainly more than the ERISA and 401k stuff, although I think that's, from a nerd perspective, pretty interesting. When we did this historic project, I was frustrated with the time it was taking to generate new housing units. And we all know that housing is in a very sad state right now and needs to get better. And I came across 3D concrete printers. And for the last 3 years, I've engaged with architects, engineers, designers, mechanical, structural, civil, a bunch of the municipalities we work with, to basically, up to where we are now, bring a 3D concrete printer to our municipality to start printing housing. And we're able to do it in a very different way than modern construction is stick building houses. We can build a 2-bed, 1-bath house here in Topeka, Kansas, and sell it for $165,000, which is crazy. And so every time we've added something to our portfolio, every time we've made a change or adjusted, it's come from us being curious about, well, why don't we do this, or why is it this way? And we engage often in partnerships with other people who have that same question or expertise in addressing it. And that's made us really successful, I feel like.
Yeah, Chris, gosh, you correctly called out. Of course, I want to talk about 3D home printing, but there's two other things. One, because you think it's cool, and two, because I think it's really cool. I think the partnership side of the way that you operate is very brilliant. I think that that is a cheat code that anyone can borrow. So I want to go there with you. But before I do, just because I know partnerships are woven into the way that you operate in that space, you said that ERISA Consulting, which for listeners' sake is an acronym, ERISA, which you're going to tell us all about that in just a minute. But you say that that is even cooler than 3D home printing, and obviously that's interwoven with 401k, retirement plan services. Talk to us about that then, because it's clearly something that absolutely lights you up and leads to the partnerships and leads to so many opportunities, and most importantly, sets your clients up for success.
Yeah, so my background as an industry brat in the insurance industry is really from the sales and consulting side, working with financial advisors and their clients. And ERISA, all it really stands for is the Employee Retirement Income Security Act. It's the act that established all the things that we now know as pensions and 401ks and all this stuff. It's monitored by the IRS and the DOL. It can be quite litigious, so there's lots of lawsuits that can happen. It's a big fiduciary risk for entrepreneurs and small business owners. It's a way to recruit, keep, and retain talent if you're trying to recruit them. And so, you talk about this entrepreneurial spirit. A lot of what I've learned that has helped me be entrepreneurial comes off of the shoulders of people who I've worked and consulted with in ERISA who have already done that. And many of the lessons I have been fortunate enough to observe and not have to learn myself come from that consulting. At the end of the day, it's really just, hey, this takes up a lot of time. 401ks from an HR and administrative perspective are challenging at the best of times. Messing up employee payroll and benefits causes a lot of stress and consternation and takes business owners away from revenue generating activity in their business. Our model at the Creek Group is to help financial advisors and small business owners, and even large business owners, to be honest, and large corporations reduce fiduciary liability and have an expert that they can call to help. And not just somebody who's just been in the industry, right? We own businesses, we have payroll vendors, we understand in a way that other companies may not really understand what the impact of these decisions are. And we can talk about not just how we've used certain strategies or ideas to help other businesses, but to help our own, right? We drink our own Kool-Aid. we have gone through the same growing pains. It puts us shoulder to shoulder with those end clients. And I think that's incredibly important, right? It's a form of partnership that isn't just a partnership on paper with legal documents, right?
Yeah, Chris, hearing you talk about that, and I mean, you called it out directly about the fact that all of your clients would rather focus on revenue generating activities. And of course, that's the case across the board. Any of us, it's why we have that phrase in marketing and sales of nobody wants a drill, they want a 1/4-inch hole in the wall. And so it's so important for all of us in our own businesses to understand what our prospects, what our clients would rather be thinking and talking about. And especially in your field, I would argue that your field is one that all of us hope to kick the can down the road. Nobody wants to think about retirement just yet because that's decades away in some cases, years away in most cases. And so with that in mind, I'd love to strategically get into your business mind, and maybe it's partially your sales and conversation mind as well. How do you frame those conversations? How do you get people to care? How do you get people to want to talk about these things?
Well, I wish more people would be willing to, but at the end of the day, you kind of have three categories. You'll have interested but relatively disengaged ownership, folks who have a good business, good cash flow, good employees who know they need a benefit, but their HR person or somebody's going to handle that. The concern I have with those clients is that the business owner is probably sacrificing benefit for themselves just because they don't want to engage, when if they just leaned in a little bit, there's some pretty crazy stuff we can do with 401k and cash balance and non-qualified plans for ownership, for highly compensated employees, for key employees. And I'm not just talking insurance policies, there's all kinds of cool stuff. We work all the time with, CPA firms and tax planning firms and law firms to help with estate planning and making a goal. If a business owner says, hey, I'm transitioning out of my business in 7 years, here's my cash flows, here's my accounts receivable, here's my projections. If we know, we can help their other financial and legal professionals get them to a pretty great retirement place. So that's the first category that I just wish people would actually lean in and talk to us, because it's not as scary as you think. And people in this space, whether it's ourselves or even other people in the industry in ERISSA, they really do want to help. And it's such a specialized piece of knowledge that almost everybody I've interacted with, from TPAs to record keepers to financial advisors, they really do mean very well in the space. We have business owners who are really in it for themselves, who just want the bare minimum for staffing. And, my advice to them is that that's awesome. I'm glad they're in it for themselves. We can do a lot with that. But there's benefits to their business if we do some good benefits for their employees too. Competitive hiring rates, good, retirement benefits. You'd be surprised how many blue collar jobs, when they post, don't talk about things like 401k benefit. And the first thing I hear truck drivers and concrete guys and construction labor ask about when they get to a new interview is, what's your retirement like? Like, what's your retirement benefit? These are folks that common media would have us just immediately disqualify because, they're a construction guy, right? And so I would always challenge people to look a little bit deeper in that space. And then the last is just these owners who are pushing every day, trying to do everything themselves. I have been there, I am there, right, with the 3D homes right now. And it's one of those things where there are a ton of people out there who want to help, and they don't want really anything for it. Sure, your attorney will charge you hourly. We have hourly fees, right? But sometimes your personal time, even if it's just time with your family, is super valuable and more important than the $200-300 you might spend getting some real professional help. And for those owners, my only comment is that you're not alone, and you shouldn't think you're alone. There are resources and allies and people who can help you get to your goals and objectives. You just got to find them.
Yeah, so well said, Chris. And along those lines, I love how much you put your trust in the experts. If you and I wanted to, I'm trying to think of some things there's a lot of things outside my skill set. I'm trying to find something outside of your skill set. But if you and I were trying to build a new sidewalk in front of our homes, you and I, could we do it, especially with YouTube University? Absolutely. I have full faith in us. But does it make more sense to turn to an expert? And that's where I'm going to use that as a pivot to talk about those partnerships, because it's so clear to me how many different experts, how many different partners you personally work with across your entire business portfolio, whether it's the financial advisors, whether it's your end clients and everyone that you can introduce to them from your network. Or also, I want to expand it to something that you inevitably have to be good at in your role across your businesses is hiring. You're really great at identifying talent and bringing them on board. So, Chris, let us get inside that part of your mind. How the heck do you identify these opportunities for people to work and grow and succeed together?
Partnerships are a great way to grow, even if they don't last beyond certain phases. And it's okay for partnerships to change. It's okay for goals to change. I think so many of us get really accustomed to the way things are that we don't always think about what we want or need them to be. And we get tied into this historic kind of, mindset where we can't let it go, or we want it to be this way forever. And that's just not how partnerships in life work. I look for a couple of things in people. First off is desire, right? I can teach skill all day. I can't teach will. If somebody doesn't have the will to do it, I don't want to force them to. If they're interested in working with us and we've got to find something different, great. That's awesome. If a partner, and I'll give you an example of this here in a bit, but if a partner loses the will to continue in the current structure, we need to be first off concerned about them personally and flexible with what we want to do, with the idea that we're really just there to build each other's successes. And so will is absolutely like, do they have the interest? And then skill's helpful, right? From a partnership perspective, what do I have to teach them? What do they have to teach me? What can we contribute, right? Because I'm not always the one bringing everything, right? A lot of times I'm the organizational and finance side of things, not the execution side of things. And finding people who want to do that. And then making sure that they feel valued and communicated with. And that's the hardest part, is continued engagement. Once you find good people, you can't, and I've been guilty of this, right? If it's not broke, don't fix it. They're out there handling their thing and you don't think they need resources, and you stop checking in, and then they get frustrated, but you don't know because you're not communicating. The thing that takes up most of my time from a staffing perspective is checking in with people, removing roadblocks and barriers, being a facilitator from a partnership perspective, because I know a lot of my role isn't tied to execution, it's tied to providing and facilitating. And then the final thing is just really clear roles and responsibilities inside of your partnership agreements. Something that served us really well is how we've written our partnership agreements for the Beacon in our event space. We're owners with family, and you often hear that, and we're really close with this family, but you often hear, don't go into business with family. But because our partnership agreement has been set up the way it has, it's prevented couples fighting. It's prevented me and my brother-in-law from doing silly stuff, or my wife and her sister ganging up on us to do something. And it's just created this necessity for compromise. And the example I was going to give you is my sister-in-law really found that she didn't like the HR aspect of the role that she had kind of fallen into. And so for about a year, we've been talking about what would make her more fulfilled. Not that she's giving that up right away, but she wants to do more. And we landed on things like design, decor, and floral, doing floral bouquets and table settings and stuff, which is a great addition to what we do at the event venue. And so instead of just holding back and saying, no, that's not what you were supposed to be doing, we're like, well, what does that look like? Do we have the capacity to support expanding into something like that? And at the time we started talking about, the answer was no. But we did know what steps we needed to take to get to a point to get there. And our discussion and decision was, if we can do those things and be successful at them, then we can go ahead and do it. And that's what we're working on now for her. Right? She has that drive and that will to do that because she didn't like what she had kind of just been defaulted into. And so I think at the end of the day, that's really important. It's like you have to check in with not just your employees, but your partners and make sure their heart's in it, make sure they're with it. Before you get into a partnership, you need to make sure that you have the same vision. If vision changes, you need to make sure that you're communicating and that nobody's doing anything wrong or maliciously. I mean, unless they're literally like stealing from you and stuff. But just this idea that we're all people and we can change. And partnerships are only as good as the heart behind the partners in the partnership at the time. And we just need to be flexible with that.
Yeah, Chris, one thing I want to call out there, to me, as someone who literally interviews entrepreneurs and talks to entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs every single day of my life, there's something that really screams out to me about the way that you think and the way that you're sharing these things with us here on the air today. And that is, it seems to me like given any circumstance, your brain defaults to, let's find a solution. You are so solution oriented. And I've found the older that I get, and I say old with regards to age, but also old with regards to number of things that I've seen. I'm in year 18 of my entrepreneurial career. And so I've seen things at this point in time. And I've found that when you look for problems, you can certainly find problems. But when you look for solutions, you'll also always find solutions. And I think that that's so clear across the board why you're able to wear so many hats and put so many people in the right position to succeed is because you see those solutions, which me giving you those kudos, I'm teeing you up a little bit because I'm very excited to hear the way you answer this last question because it is so broad. And that is, what's your best piece of advice for listeners? Knowing that we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own growth journeys, and very much knowing that you are one of us as a fellow entrepreneur yourself, what's that one piece of advice that you want to leave them with today?
I think that there's so many things we could talk about here, but I think realistic goal setting is the best advice I can give somebody. I have been trained in corporate management and goal setting and accountability and Sandler and Fusion, all these things. And the item that has stuck with me for a long time comes from training from AT&T, which is just SMART goal setting. So simple, measurable, actionable, reasonable, and time-bound. Creating goals based on your dream, right? Because everybody loves to buy, right? They love to buy their own dreams, their own goals, their own futures, but they hate being sold. And this idea that you're kind of selling yourself on your own dream, I mean, if you design it, but you don't have these incremental, really measurable goals to get to the step that precedes the step that precedes the step to your dream, then really it's just a dream. There's nothing to it. But if you plan and you just take time, it's like, and I'm not a big gym guy, but it always comes back to like, would you rather have started exercising now or 5 years ago? And 5 years from now, would you rather have started 5 years ago? The best time to plant a tree is 5 years ago, those sorts of ideas. And I think just simple, reasonable goals and being curious, because if you get to a point where you get stuck and you don't have the skill set to move forward, that's when you go look for partnerships. That's when you go look for help. That's when you call your lawyer buddy that you golf with or your CPA friend that you meet at a business networking. That's where you turn those small, reasonable goals into actionable items so that you can get from step 1 to 2 to 3 and vet whether it's actually going to work. There's things I wish I had done differently in each of our different businesses, and I'm probably going to think that forever. But anytime we need to adjust, it's here's the goal, here's where we are, what's the very first step, what's the very first item we have to measure to get to the next step, to the next step, to the end goal.
Ooh, I love that advice, Chris. You really put that into focus right there, that a dream is not merely enough, which is funny because for all of us as entrepreneurs, we're all dreamers. We're all big thinkers. We're all very ambitious. But that to me, and it's so typical for all the things that we've talked about here today, is that you tie it to really practical, action-focused goals and putting pen to paper. That to me, that's going to be what I think about when I think of Chris Stemler, is putting pen to paper, turning these things into reality. And I think it shows across your entire portfolio of all the things that you do and also all the things that you help people with. So huge kudos to you, Chris. I'm very excited for listeners to go deeper into all the cool things that you've got going on, especially as I teased it at the very top of today's episode. It's a conversation that most people don't have and never have. And truth be told, Chris, as someone who's been an entrepreneur for so long, it's hard to know who to turn to. So I'm so appreciative of you showing up the way that you have. So you got to drop those links on us. For listeners who want to go deeper into all these things, where should they go from here to find you and all your great work online?
Yeah, the two best places are just www.thecretegroup.com. So Crete like the island, CRETE, or 3dhomebuilder.com. Those are the two main websites we operate off of and the best way to look at some of what we're doing.
Yes, Chris, I don't know how you got that domain name, but huge kudos to you. That is so incredible that you got that domain. Also, I'm going to add one link in there, is that we're going to be linking to your personal LinkedIn. So if a listener is tuning in and saying, I want to talk to this guy, I want to continue the conversation, then listeners, you already know the drill. We're dropping all of those links down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. Otherwise, Chris, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks, Brian. Really appreciate it. Have a great day.